Well, I was in college and I was working for a company called Celebrations Unlimited, and I was a disc jockey, and that's actually how I paid for school. And the guy I was working for decided that he was going to move to New York and try to pursue a career on Broadway, and so he offered the business to me to purchase, and that was my first business. I got the money together, bought the business, and went from working in a company as a DJ to running a company of DJs.
Was that a solid investment?
Yeah, it actually worked out really well. It was so successful that I actually left college to pursue it full time, and did it for several years, and then ultimately decided that I didn't want to be the old guy in the bar, because the career path there is you end up 40 years old, spinning records in a bar. Although nowadays, we do it on computers. But
so you started in DJing. You spent some time in insurance.
I did, yeah.
In the travel industry.
Yep.
Heavy equipment.
Yep.
What brought you to property development?
Well, while I was in the heavy equipment business, we needed a location, and we found some land in Stafford. And since we were already in the business and we dealt with a lot of contractors, we thought, what do we need to hire a general contractor for? We could just build it ourselves. And I tell people now that I built the second building to get all the money back that I lost trying to build the first one, because you don't know what you don't know until you give it a try. And we didn't know a lot, but we got it done. And while I was in the heavy equipment business, I took a lot of the money that I earned in that business and invested it in real estate, so that by the time I sold out of the heavy equipment business, it was a natural fit for me to pursue property development full time.
How close are those industries? Because I think you've told me that most of the most successful entrepreneurs spend time in that industry learning on somebody else's dime before they make it on their own. So this heavy equipment, does that just kind of transfer right into property development? Or?
Well, certainly some aspects of it, because you're dealing with a lot of the same subcontractors when you sell heavy equipment that you're going to be dealing with when you go to build a building. But there are a lot of differences too. So I think if it hadn't been for the fact that I built our office and then spent some of my other time while I was in that business building other buildings and investing in other properties, I probably wouldn't have had enough relevant experience to avoid some of the pitfalls. But because I was doing both,
you got to learn as a customer then.
Exactly, yeah. And I think what we do a little bit differently is that we handle lots of different segments of the development business. So you'll have a developer, for instance, that'll put a deal together and then sell it to somebody. You'll have a developer who will put a deal together and hire a general contractor to build the building. You'll have a developer who will do that and then hire a property manager to manage the building. We actually do all of that. So we'll actually put the deal together. We're Class A general contractors, so we'll actually build the property, and then we also manage the buildings that we build. So we kind of take it from cradle to grave, so to speak.
So you grew up in Boston, you went to school in Maryland.
Yep.
What brought you to Fredericksburg, and how did you decide that was a good place to start doing development?
So I found Fredericksburg through my first wife. She went to Mary Washington, and while she was here, she made some good friends and also some connections, so that while she was in college, she had a job working for a family here, and then that family introduced us to a lot of folks that we became friends with here. And so ultimately, we decided to build a home here, and then I moved here and went to work in a heavy equipment business here with that family.
You've been doing this for going on 12 years. What's been you got to have some war stories. What's been your most difficult project? Let's start there.
Well, most recently we've been doing the George Street Brownstone project, and that's the one where I think a lot of people have been reading about in the paper and saw the ongoing issues that we had with the city. We set out to build some brownstones behind the building that we're sitting in, the National Bank building, and I think folks were very excited that we wanted to take on the restoration of this building, and part of that process involved having to develop the entire site, in order to have the money that it would take to rehabilitate this building. And as we worked our way through the ARB process and ultimately got that approval, some folks in the city decided that they weren't as happy about the ultimate design as others were, and there were some issues where the design was overruled by city council. We ended up having, unfortunately, to sue the city, and then the city ended up having to sue its own ARB, and so it was a protracted mess for a while, but ultimately it worked out. Ultimately, we came together with the city, we made some compromises, we came to a mind on a new design, and I'm glad glad to say it got resolved and we're moving forward with the project.
That could cost you millions of dollars, right?
Yeah, and that's why, in my field, you spend a lot of time up front, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. You spend a lot of time in due diligence, investigating a deal, making sure that you understand very clearly what your rights are as the property owner, what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. And ultimately, that's what led to the position that we had to take in the lawsuit. We didn't have a lot of options. In reality, we were already pregnant. We were going to have this child. It wasn't like we could walk away from the deal. So we had to, defend our position vigorously, and ultimately, we came together and worked it out. But yeah, this business, you're putting millions of dollars at risk, and you don't do that lightly. You try to make sure that you've investigated all the potential pitfalls and you've prepared yourself for all the eventual outcomes. That's the goal, anyway.
Do you have a favorite project?
Rather than saying I have a favorite project, I think I'll say that what I like is seeing the process. I like starting with a plot of dirt. I like seeing the building go up, and ultimately I like seeing people live in those properties and work in those properties and seeing those properties generate activity and revenue for the community. And it's nice to know that, in some small way, you've changed the landscape. You've left a mark, and ultimately, when it's all said and done, that property is going to be there long after you're gone.
Building a legacy through development.
Yeah, and even this National Bank building that we're sitting in, this building is soon to be 200 years old. And when you think back about, Abraham Lincoln was in this building, it's pretty neat to be a steward of it. You never really own it. You just take care of it for a while until the next person comes along to take care of it. It's a lot of fun.
What makes JON Properties unique?
Well, I think what I mentioned earlier, just the fact that we take a project, from cradle to grave, with the continuity of leadership, of being able to say that the same people are involved in every step of the project. That gives our partners a peace of mind, knowing that we're involved in every aspect of the development. It gives them the assurity that, I'm an investor in it, and we're going to make sure that we get the return that we set out to get, and that we complete it on time and under budget.
Probably save a lot of money, right? If you're doing multiple aspects of the project yourself, there's not as much markup.
Exactly. We take a lot of margin out. That's right, and that returns, that gives a better return to our investors. No question. That makes a big difference. I think the other thing that makes us unique is that a lot of the projects that we've done, we've partnered with our tenants. The old model of I build the building, I'm the landlord, you're the tenant. I have to go find a tenant every 5 years. That's okay and that works. But there's in some deals there's a better way to do it. Why not find a person who needs space but maybe doesn't have all the capital they need to own the building, and partner with them, so that in 5 years I'm not looking for a tenant because my tenant is an owner in the building with me.
So you may not have the data to show it yet, but I imagine if you bring the tenant into the development process and give them that kind of buy-in on the property, you might have a customer for life at that point, right?
That's the plan, yeah. In our experience, there are lots of folks out there that they've got a good business, they've got a good track record, they've paid their rent month in and month out, but they don't necessarily have the capital it takes to acquire a property, or the amount of space that they need in a building isn't large enough to acquire a full building. They need a piece of it. And so in that instance, maybe we bring 3 or 4 people like that together to do a larger project where there's more economies of scale in terms of site work and water management and all of the bigger issues that affect the price of a building. And by bringing a group together, we can get the cost down such that they can be an owner in the whole project. It's a win-win.
Is there anything particularly difficult about our region?
I don't know that it's particularly difficult. Certainly when you work in a historic district like downtown Fredericksburg, there's a lot of sensitivity. We're dealing with really old buildings that were built with different construction methods that we need to be aware of as we're remodeling them or restoring them. You work in very close quarters when you work in the city. It's not like you're on a 5-acre site and there's nobody around you. We've got to be worried about soil contamination and bringing dirt out into paved streets. We've got to be worried about neighbors. We've got to be worried about noise. So there's a lot of things like that go along with it. I think there's a lot of advantages to our region, to be honest with you. The fact that we have such a stable economy because of our reliance on the government and the military. It really provides such a strong base for everything else that we do here. And then you throw the university in and the hospital center. We've got a lot going for us in this region.
Has there been anyone who has kind of influenced or helped you get started in this area?
So when I made the transition from the heavy equipment business to the development business, I called on a dear friend who's passed away, Bob ONeill, quite a bit. And he was very helpful in giving me advice and guidance, helping me with deal structure, helping me to understand, some of the potential pitfalls, the things to double check in my pro forma, helping me to understand what banks would look for from a pro forma, really just kind of helping me get my brains around the business.
I can imagine how invaluable that might have been, because you can't put a dollar figure on it now, but the amount of heartache he might have saved you by helping you out in advance.
Well, he did, and he was the kind of person who was just very gracious with what he knew. He was always willing to share it, and he was an open book in that regard. And I think in the long run, I really try to emulate that when I talk to other folks too.
It's certainly a trait that I've tried to emulate. There are some of those extremely successful entrepreneurs, and even less successful, but still doing well on their own, that are an open book and they don't mind sharing ideas with you.
Right.
I've tried to do that myself, because in my mind, if I tell you everything about the way I do everything, I give you every bit of trade craft or trade secret that's out there, you still have to outwork me.
Well, that's a fair point. I've always believed that we stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us. I don't care what business you're in. Ultimately, it's about relationships. It's about the relationships that you form within your industry. It's about the relationships that you form outside of it. It's about your relationships with your banks, your partners. I've never done a deal that wasn't predicated on a good relationship. And so at the end of the day, those relationships start with being open and honest and sharing. And the fact that people would think that an idea is something to be coveted and it's something to be secreted away is just silly. I mean, at the end of the day, it's information and it should flow, and you should be willing to help people, because at the same time that you're helping them, they may be helping you, just with their response to whatever it is that you're sharing. But I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for a number of people that shared things with me along the way and helped me with either a word of encouragement or a word of advice.
It's amazing how community can kind of help grow its entrepreneurs from within.
It can, but one of the things that I think is really important that it's hard to understand when you're starting out is that you feel like you've got to give off this image of self-confidence and that you know everything in order for people to believe in you. When in reality, you're much stronger when you're honest and you're open and you say, I don't really understand this. I don't really know. I mean, how many meetings have you sat in where people were nodding around the table like they knew everything that was being said around them and they didn't know a damn thing? When it's that one person that goes, could you go back a minute? Could you explain that one more time? Because half the time that you ask somebody to go back and explain it, you realize that it wasn't that you didn't understand what was said, it was that what was said didn't make any sense. So now you're going back and you're really getting to the heart of the matter. And that happens a lot.
How do you protect those relationships?
When I think about that, I think about things like, being honest and being trustworthy, and making sure that you keep your commitments, probably more so than anything else. I'm in a business that, unfortunately has a track record of people that overpromise and underdeliver. I mean, that's no slight against other folks in my industry. It's just, it's almost become a running joke. I mean, there's actually a commercial that's out that you can watch where the family is sitting there with the guy who's going to remodel their house, and he's saying, okay, you see that beam over there? That's over. That's a load-bearing wall. I'm going to rip that out, and and that's going to cost you extra money and extra time. And at the end, the tagline is, wouldn't it be great if people said, what they really meant? And so unfortunately, I'm in a business where, that's become the norm. So breaking that norm, breaking that stereotype means, delivering on what you commit to do. building what you said you were going to build, following through when times are tough, and making sure that you don't leave those promises unfulfilled.
Are you involved in the local community?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I came to Fredericksburg and settled in Fredericksburg and chose to raise a family in Fredericksburg. I think Fredericksburg's a great place to be involved if you choose to be. You can really make a difference here and have an impact. Over the years, I've tried to get involved in things that, follow the passions that I have. So sports is a good example. Been a big baseball fan all my life. And so when there was an opportunity to work with the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation and build some ball fields here for some underprivileged youth in our area, we jumped in with both feet and really got behind it. Over the years, I've been involved in Central Virginia Housing Coalition, which helps to provide affordable housing in our region and helps folks with a number of housing issues. Been involved in my Rotary Club here for a number of years as well. Chair of the scholarship committee there. The club raises a lot of money every year and gives it out to kids who are going to college and supports them in that mission. And most recently, have become involved in the Fredericksburg Area Museum. So I'm really happy to be involved in a number of things here locally.
I've heard about the Rotary Club quite a bit. I know that they're pretty active in the area. What's your involvement? What do they do? Tell us about them.
So the Fredericksburg Rotary Club has been around for almost 100 years, believe it or not. So Rotary's motto is service above self. And the idea is that you get a lot of folks who are very active in the business community to come together once a week for camaraderie, fellowship, and at the same time to associate with other like-minded individuals. In other words, folks that are ethically minded and are driven by a mission to serve other people. And so Rotary does that in a number of ways internationally and then locally. So internationally, what they're most known for is helping to eradicate polio in the world. And that's an unbelievable thing. And then locally, our chapter, as I said, has taken up the mission of education. And we do that by providing dictionaries in schools, by providing college scholarships in our area to both kids that are going to vocational schools as well as four-year universities. But if there's a need in the community, there's a Rotarian standing by to help with it, and that goes for all the other clubs in our area as well. So it's a great organization. It's a great organization for networking and camaraderie, but it's also a great organization because of the good that it does.
What's in a name? How'd you come up with JON Properties?
So JON Properties, everybody says John like the name without the H, and it's Jacob, my firstborn son, Olivia, my daughter, and Noah, my secondborn son, so my three children. Came up with the name as an acronym for them with a good friend, Jason Cohen's help. Actually, we were sitting around spitballing what to call this new company, and he said, well, you could do Adams, you could do this, you could do that. And I thought, well, I don't really want to do my name, but he said, well, what about your kids' names? And that's how it happened. Yeah.
Kids active in the business? Are they going to take over?
I don't know. I've got one son who's in college now, Jacob, and he's doing great. He's actually got his real estate license, and he's enjoying the business. But you don't know. It's probably too soon to tell. What I want for them is to find their way and to figure out what their passion is and to pursue it. And if it happens to be in this field, all the better. But if not, I'll be right there to support them with whatever they decide to do.
Do you struggle at all with work-life balance?
That's really important to me, and it's one of the things that I love best about being an entrepreneur. It can be a pitfall and a trap, but if you manage your time carefully, I think it is possible to have your cake and eat it too. I think I'm very careful, and my wife Elizabeth is very careful about keeping a very good balance in our life between work, time with the kids, travel, sports, all of those things. But it's important, and you have to be mindful. You got to be mindful of your relationship with your spouse and making sure that you make time for that. A wise person said to me when I was getting married, they said, you can get married, but don't forget to date. You got to date your wife. Just because you're married to her doesn't mean you stop dating. And so that's been important for us. We've maintained that, and we maintain that connection with our kids, by spending time with them.
I struggle with it quite a bit. I'll be completely honest. I put in a lot of 90-hour weeks. even though I tell people one of the biggest reasons I'm an entrepreneur is because nobody's ever going to tell me I can't go to my daughter's football game. And so how do you strike that balance? It's certainly a learning process.
Well, you got to be mindful, and you got to be committed to making it happen. And the tough thing is that, as you go through life, there's all sorts of things, not just time with your kids, but there's travel, there's important events in your friends' lives. And so you're either going to decide that I'm going to block this time out and I'm going to be committed to doing that like I would be to going to a business meeting, or you're not. And at the end of the day, it's another appointment on your calendar, just like everything else. And it deserves that same respect and commitment that all those other things deserve. And believe me when I tell you that if you treat it that way, everything else will backfill around it. It works out. It's the trap is believing that it won't, believing that if I'm not at that extra meeting, something bad is going to happen or nothing good is going to come of it. The world's not going to end. It's not going to fall apart. It's going to keep on turning and keep on ticking. So,
I appreciate you speaking with us. You're going to be presenting to NextGen for Midweek Motivation. It's actually Monday Motivation this time.
Mm-hmm.
It's May 22nd.
Right.
Do you want to give us a little teaser as to what you're going to be speaking about?
Well, I'm going to share one of my favorite books, a Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, and then also talk about the Merlin Principle. So looking forward to it.
Is that like a Harvard business textbook, the places you'll go? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Harvard Business for kindergartners. Yeah, it's a great book, and I think I'll talk a lot about how relevant it is at every stage of your life and your business career. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And thanks for watching.